Excited to be with you once again. My name is Jeff Fuller, J Fuller Interviews. You can certainly find me on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It is our call to share people's stories to help our story become more impactful and inspired. So let's hear some great stories. You can certainly subscribe on YouTube, J Fuller Interviews on YouTube. Just hit the little greater than icon at the bottom of the screen and you can subscribe to this channel. But I'm so excited, and I have to give a shout out to my daughter. She was a part of a leadership conference, selected sophomores within the state of Vermont, and she had a speaker that she said, Dad, you have to try to book him and get him on your show because he has an excellent story, great communicator, and my daughter just loved you. So Devine Carama, great to have you on. Thanks so much.
Hey, I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity.
And so let's start right here. You do some music, a little bit of hip hop, Kentucky.com. Where did that love of music first begin?
So I think the love of music for me started when I was young. I was kind of a shy kid, was bullied a lot when I was young. And I think I got into hip hop because it kind of gave me a voice, a place to kind of express what I was going through. And then again, as a person that wanted to speak but was kind of socially awkward and shy, I could speak through the music. So that's kind of where I got my start. And then as I got older, I realized, maybe I can impact and inspire other people's lives with the same art form that has inspired me. And that's kind of how I use the music today.
Devon, who are some of the influences musically that really helped you grow up, or some people that just you turned to when you were adolescent?
Sure. Early on, I was a big Nas fan, just because, his technical skill set of rhyming and putting words together was something I admired, as a young writer. But I think as a teenager growing up, I look at artists like Common, Talib Kweli, The Roots, Lauryn Hill, any artist who has, socially conscious commentary in their music, anybody who was trying to inspire others in their music, kind of made me feel at home because that's what I wanted to do. But at the time, a lot of people were using hip hop in other ways, which I don't judge. But for me, I wanted to use it to inspire and to see those artists that were already doing that on the mainstream level. They were huge inspirations for me coming up.
Definitely. And here's a picture of you. It's the Phen Movement. Could you just talk a little bit about this project, this movement that you are a part of?
Sure, sure. Phen stands for Full Energy, No Drugs, and it is actually a informative phone app, incentive-based phone app for teens. So they download the app, they take a bunch of quizzes, get a lot of information on the impacts of opioid misuse, and then they can win anything from a gas card, a gift card to the movies, even a college scholarship. So it's just a way of meeting young people where they are, to try to keep them healthy, and kind of be the antithesis to the glorification of drug use, which a lot of them are seeing in popular music and on social media. So I'm the Lexington community director. So my job is to get as many young people engaged in this app as possible.
Devon, that's pretty amazing. I just wanted to ask you, tell me a little bit about where you grew up, how you grew up. Kentucky, it lends itself to Kentucky, but did you grow up in Louisville?
I actually grew up in Lexington, Kentucky, which is about an hour from Louisville. I lived in Louisville for a while as an adult, spent a lot of time in Louisville, but I'm from Lexington, Kentucky. Grew up in a great household. I always tell my mom, even when we didn't have a lot of money, or we weren't living in the suburbs, I always felt like we were rich, because my parents just spoiled us as a child, and never, even when they were going through the struggle, they never wanted us to know it. And I got to see my parents work their way from the housing projects to a an apartment to a two room duplex, and all the way to the purchasing a house. So I think seeing my parents kind of go from nothing to something as a kid really inspired me. You know, and having both my mom and my dad in my life really kind of gave me balance growing up as a kid. So when I grew up and endured some hardships and had to struggle, I could look back to my parents and saw how they were able to fight through struggle and gradually build themselves up. And that's really inspired me growing up.
Yeah, that's so good. Devine Carama, make some time. And on this picture behind me, you have a T-shirt that says "The War on Ignorance." And
Yeah,
definitely during this social, cultural battle that we're experiencing now, it seems like it's fought every 30 years again and again without making much progress. But could you just talk about what you've been going through, not just the George Floyd murder, but just the context that we're in as a society, from COVID to this injustice? How are you doing? And yes, as a black man in Kentucky.
I appreciate that. Shout out to my brother and my cousin Pete for that shirt. I appreciate you asking me that. You know, it has been a struggle. It's been a real struggle, and this is something that just as a black man in the South, I've been dealing with my entire life. But I think what we're seeing nationally and all over the world is something that we've known within our community for a long time, and that is there's a systemic disparity between the African American experience and everybody else. You had mentioned COVID-19. The statistics here in Kentucky, it's unreal. We make up 15% of the population in Lexington, yet we make up 33% of the COVID cases. So right there shows a disparity in the healthcare system. And you could go to jobs, you could go to you know, the prisons, you could go to educational opportunities, um, large government contracts, the lack of business loans. You know, black businesses have been able to secure. You know, you could just go down the line. So, you know, as hurt as I am with the recent events that's been going on in this country, I also see opportunity. And I'm just hoping that we can finally seize this opportunity to tackle some of these systemic issues within our society, so that we're not back here in another 2 years or 10 years or 50 years protesting in the streets again. So, you know, I'm hanging in there, but I'm hopeful that this is providing an opportunity for change as well.
Yeah, definitely. We just try to go step by step and grow. And I think that's what's amazing about different relationships, whether it's this forum or not, that you get to meet individuals and then you get
Yeah,
to hear their stories and share those. I was reminded of a quote that it said, "It's difficult to be enemies with your friends."
excuse me.
Yes. And I wish we would
Sorry.
just make time to become friends with people that we don't know, then we would understand we have a lot more in
That's what it's
common.
about.
I say
There's more.
this
Yep.
I asked this very carefully because I don't want to put you in a weird position.
No,
But
sure.
have you yourself been a product of being pulled over while being black or having something done? Do you have a story of when you were growing up of that happening to you?
Oh yeah. You know, it was funny. I used to count. Um, and I think I stopped counting in my mid 20s at 23 stops that I got pulled over essentially for nothing. Um, but there was one story that sticks out in my head. I can remember I was heading to see a girl that I was dating. And around Lexington, there's several smaller towns. And growing up, you know, obviously you get the talk from your parents, you know, how to respond whenever you are pulled over. But then also growing up in Kentucky, you also get the talk of once you get outside of Lexington, you really got to be careful in some of these smaller towns. So I kind of got caught late at night, driving through one of the smaller towns, pulled over for no reason. Wasn't speeding. To this day, I was never answered as to why I was pulled over. But when I was pulled over, I guess the officers, it was two police cars. The dog was barking in the back of one of the police cars, and he says, "You know, I think my dog is smelling something. I need you to get out of your car." Now, obviously, I didn't know my rights. I was real young, maybe even been a teenager at the time. and held me at gunpoint. It was three officers, guns drawn on me again, hadn't done anything. Asked me to get out of my car, unlawfully searched my car with the dogs and everything. Handcuffed me, had me laying on my stomach. Literally was thinking, this is it. This is the end. I just wanted to go see somebody I was dating. They didn't find anything in the car. They ran my license. There were no warrants or anything, obviously. And eventually they let me go. But the feeling that I had after that, I'll never forget. I remember just sitting in my car, just crying, just thinking like, I'm just a human being like anybody else. Why do I have to be subjected to this? And then as I continue to grow up, several instances like that on lower scales have happened my entire life, and you almost become numb to it. And it's rough, man.
Yeah, for me up here in Vermont, it's interesting, especially for me. I was adopted, grew up here, and it was almost celebrated being a minority, at least within the
Hmm.
friendships and people that we have, because it's like, no, this is the right thing. So when I show up, people are like, oh, a minority, let's give him love and attention and let him know that we
Right.
care about him. And then hearing stories like yours, there are those that are, oh, that's just for TV, or that was manufactured, or how did and I'm so
Yeah.
sorry that you had to experience that and that people experience that every day. I just pray and hope that we can change that.
Yeah.
Something
Thank
that
you.
I love that you do is speaking at Hobie with my daughter, as I mentioned, but giving back to your community. How important is it for you, or why is it so important that you give back to the younger students and to your own family?
Yeah, I had a teacher when I was young, my art teacher, Miss Buckley, and then my mom kind of echoed the same adage, and that is just be the change. We can complain about what we don't like, or we can just go out there and just try to be what we want to see. So I think that's part of it. I think my faith, just as a Christian, just being the hands and feet of Him down here on earth, is part of my mission. And then I have to give props to my mom, because as a young kid, my mom, like 3 or 4 years old, she was giving me books on Martin Luther King and different figures in African American history who were pivotal in getting me where I was. I'm standing on the shoulders of them. So I was inspired as a kid, and I always used to, say, I want to do something that's impactful one day. I want to leave behind a legacy. I want to improve other people's lives. So, now, I've dedicated my life to that. And my mission and ministry is just trying to unify people, but also, help those that may need a little helping hand.
Now, if you would just talk about your family and how have you been able to communicate with them to stand up for social injustice or injustice as a whole, but also to translate what you've learned and experienced to the rest of your family.
Sure. Um, you know, you know, a lot of my family have had their own experiences. My wife has had her own experiences. My daughter is a teenager, so she's had some experiences. So, when my daughter was younger, and I would try to kind of prepare her for how things were, it was kind of like, "Oh, Dad, you always talking this, pro black stuff, whatever. It's not that bad. Leave me alone." And then she grows up, and she starts to experience some things, and she doubles back and says, "Okay, Dad, now I understand why you said this and why you said that." So just kind of preparing your kids and understanding that they may not understand what you're talking about right away, but when you instill that foundation of just awareness and consciousness, when they grow up and they have these experiences, they have that foundation already built in. So it's the same thing my parents did for me, and I'm hoping, glass half full type guy. I'm hoping that my kids won't have to have those type of conversations in preparation for their children. So, only time will tell.
Definitely. And as a pastor, I love well, the title of this, the good news, because that is the gospel, the good news that
That's
we
it.
have. And I just appreciate so much the fact that you use art and music to communicate your message. I actually was interviewing Abigail Smithson. She has a podcast, and she is an artist, but she said having people to come to my gallery, especially now and during a pandemic, it doesn't happen. But to get that art outside of just a physical building is so important. Could you just talk why? I mean, I have so many questions with hip hop. I am not a
Yeah,
lyricist. I do like some poetry, but just
yeah,
the process. Could you just talk about the process of putting together a good song, but just coming from the heart at the same time?
sure. And that's what I love about it is that dynamic of the technical part of creating music, but then also infusing, the passion and heart and soul into it. Um, Hip hop was designed to be a voice for the voiceless. For poor people, inner city people, brown and black people. So that was its origin. It was supposed to be the mouthpiece of the struggle of injustice, systemic racism. So that's the foundation of hip hop culture. Um, so as I've gotten to hip hop, when it comes to making music and creating music, it's so unique because you're talking about your story. And I just love it, man. I love playing with words. I love seeing different ways I can put words together, but then also like the unique ways I can tell stories, whether through fiction or real life stories, how to convey a message, um, how to take this talent and put it in a way that other people can benefit from it. There's a strategicness to that I just enjoy as an artist. And I think for me, that's the main thing for me now. It's less about the technical skill or how nice and how good I can be, and it's more how can I impact people, how can I move them. When a lot of people talk about Tupac, and I'll close here. Tupac is considered one of the greatest rappers ever, but it's not because he was this technically sound lyricist. He didn't use a lot of double entendres and metaphors. He wasn't going to blow your mind with his vocabulary, but he always made you feel something. It was the emotion and the passion that Tupac had, and he made you feel it, which is why we still play his music 25, 30 years later. And to me, that is when hip hop is at its best.
How old were you when you realized you had the gift to spit bars, as the kids say these
Yeah,
days?
yeah. I was 16, 1996. I was always into poetry, was a huge hip hop fan. And I said, let me try to put the pen to paper and see if I could do this. And I did it and let a couple of my friends hear it. And it was like, man, you got a gift. And that's when I realized that, maybe one day that would be something I could do.
And this is, believe, your latest work, "Worshiping in the Wilderness." How did this come about?
Yes. So initially, it started with COVID-19. I completed the entire project within the quarantine. It was about 2.5 months, and it was just talking about the racial disparities. It was talking about, you know, being in this dark, barren place, being in this wilderness that at the time the country was in, but still maintaining your faith, still being able to worship even in your wilderness. But then, it started to evolve. Then we start seeing the rash of murders of unarmed black people in America, so then that became part of the wilderness. And then, losing my other teenage daughter, she got in a car wreck Easter night. It was April 12th. So then that became part of my wilderness. So really the concept of the album is, when you are at your worst point in your life, whether it is drugs, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it is death, whether it is a global pandemic, whether it is systemic racism, depression, when you are at your worst point, maintain the faith, understand that everything you're going through is preparing you for the next thing, but is also inspiring others to make it through their wilderness, and just continue to worship, continue to worship. So that's kind of the concept of the album. And it ended up coming out probably easily, definitely my most personal body of work, along with the good news. But I would say probably my best body of work.
Hmm. I'm so sorry to hear about your daughter. Interestingly enough, that's my son's birthday, April 12th. And so
Wow.
he just
Wow.
turned 18.
Yeah.
And could you just dive in a little bit more to that? Because a lot of people going through such tragedy and heartache would say there cannot be a God. But how did that push you closer to God and deeper in your faith?
Well, we understand as believers in scripture, we understand right away that we're not going to understand everything. We're not going to understand what everything that God is doing. But I believe, that he is perfect. I believe even though there are some things that are hard for us to handle, and death is one of those, that the place that my daughter is in now is the place that we all want to end up, and that she is in a painless place. One thing me and my mom always tell each other is whatever God needed my daughter for up there, it must have been something only she could do. um, and then also there's still a legacy that we can continue for her down here.
Right.
And death is just something that will because we all die, so that is just something that everyone will go through. So how can I use this experience as a public figure, to inspire others who are eventually going to be going through the same thing, albeit not, maybe not a child, but just death in general. So just trying to find perspective, allowing myself to grieve while still being, strong for my family, and understanding that though I may not see it now, that I know that there will be a blessing out of this. God will continue to get the glory. Sometimes, in situations like this, you can't lean on anybody else but God, and I think He puts us in those situations sometimes. So if anything, it's, I had a lot of questions at first, but as the process continues, the daily process, I am, um, you know, stronger in my faith, I think, now than ever before.
Well, thank you so much for that. Devine Carama making some time at kingtucky.com is where you can find more information. And I just wanted to ask you with this normal, I've stopped calling it the new normal because it's been 10 weeks or so now.
Yeah.
Being an artist, being a performer, enjoying crowds and getting your message out in that way, have you learned how to pivot just to share your message besides being on multiple Zoom calls?
Yes. Oh man. Been a lot of Zoom calls. Um, yeah, honestly, I think for me, I kind of needed the break, because I'm one of those people that are always on the go, always in front of the camera, always on stage. So I think I've kind of embraced the break, to be honest. But you do, as an artist, as a messenger, you do miss those platforms to get the word out there. And like you said, the Zoom calls. I've done a couple of online workshops. I did a couple COVID casts, is what they were called, where I would go to a venue, and perform in an empty venue, but they would live stream it online. Just being able to be creative with social media. I'm accessing and doing things I had never did a Zoom before. I've never utilized Facebook Live as much as I do now. So, just being able to be creative, but then also embracing the break as well.
Well, Devine Karama, thank you so much for making the time for us this morning. And I just have one last question to get you out on, and that's simply when you spoke to those sophomores from Vermont the other day, what is a timeless truth, whether you're a sophomore in high school, whether you're 45 like I am, or whether you're 83 like my dad is? What is something that you would like to share with all of us that we could learn from, but be inspired to live towards during this time, but even beyond?
Sure. One thing I told them at the end of my speech, I told all the sophomores, was I asked them, if any of them knew the brand name of the shoes or the suit of, say, a Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks, and obviously nobody knew. I even asked them if they knew the exact number of followers LeBron James has on Instagram, and none of them could answer that. But what they all could answer and what they all did know is they knew about Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. They knew Rosa Parks refused to move to the back of the bus. They knew LeBron was a basketball player, and I told them that that's telling. That and all these great figures that we know and these historic figures, we don't know them because the brand name of their clothes, their labels, even their social media following. What we know about them is what they did to impact lives. And I think that is the same for all of us. I don't think there's anything wrong with using social media because I use it. There's nothing wrong with looking good when you go out. But I think we all got to maintain perspective that those aren't the things that people will remember about us. What people will remember about us is going to be what we do. So we all have a part to play in just bringing this world together and making the world a better place. So I just challenge everybody to ask yourself, what are you going to do? What are people going to remember about you in 50 years or 100 years? And I think if we all look at things in that perspective, it'll challenge and push us all to try to make the world a better place.
I think that's great. Devine Carama just sharing a Phen Movement. You can go to the website and check that out as well. And kingtucky.com is where you can find all things Divine. Hey, thank you so much. I just want to talk about Worshiping in the Wilderness. Make sure you purchase that download and help support
Yes.
what's taking place as well. Divine,
Thank you,
thank you
Jeff.
so much. Enjoy your week, and hopefully it's not too hot for you. We're hoping to get some of that heat up here in Vermont, but
Oh, it's coming.
stay
Hopefully.
fresh. Stay
All right,
fresh.
man.
All right. We'll
Thanks,
catch you
Jeff. Stay
soon.
in touch, man.
Yeah, for sure. Again, that's Devine Carama making some time and staying with us this morning. My name is Jeff Fuller. You can certainly subscribe on YouTube. Jay Fuller Interviews on YouTube, the Facebook group, Instagram, and Twitter. We have a former Denver Bronco coming up this afternoon, Carl Mecklenburg, making some time for him and some great guests. You can check those out on the Instagram page, Jay Fuller Interviews, and certainly subscribe on YouTube. Thank you again. We'll talk to you soon. And yeah, we look forward to sharing people's stories so your story can be impacted, inspired, and transformed to be better and live more because that's the good news.